are cost estimates. They are not the bid cost. They're not the actual cost. This entire project will be competitively bid. The one of the costs that I don't think anyone is aware of is the utility relocation work. There is overhead Edison and AT&T lines that will have to be relocated underground. There is also a fiber optic line that will have to be relocated. These utility locations alone, if memory serves me right, is about $350,000 to $400,000. And that's not our estimate. That is the estimate that was given to us by the utility companies.
Could I ask if we have some kind of a document, a budget that shows the cost of all these? I mean, that must be in existence right now.
Sure.
It shouldn't have to be something that we do now.
Right.
So that would be something that I would think that we should have in these next few weeks, is that cost estimate.
Your Honor, this members of council, this week we'll have our cost estimates given to you, as well as put them on the website. We'll also have copies of what the Steve had put together for us, and the elements I think that we have essentially, in addition to the utilities, are grading and site work, the building, the bridge, infrastructure, and parking. Is there anything else?
Platform.
Platform. Okay. I think those components, then we could give a sense on what the cost would be for each component. Okay.
I agree with. Councilman Slater, please.
I can wait.
I agree with.
I was going to say the same thing. I think I agree with that, but I know there has to be a document. I think I've been around the federal government long enough to know that they're not going to just give you $8.48 million and not scrutinize where that money is going to go. So I assume there's oversight to this budget to some degree.
There certainly was, and the estimate, as I mentioned earlier, for that included Birmingham was over $10 million, but that also included acquisition of property and
I also have
some of the acquisition, but wasn't enough to, and that's when there was a city Birmingham and city share, because there wasn't enough federal funds to cover the entire cost.
I also have seen a little bit about government funding. They also have strings attached. I would like to see an analysis of the strings attached with this acquisition of this money, if in fact we go forward. There's no strings attached?
There are none. No. Typically, like on road projects, we have a 20% match, sometimes a 10% match. If you look at what we spent to date, it amounts to about a 5% match to the $8.5 million. But other than that, there is no local share.
I have a problem too with I'm sorry, I really wanted to get this out. I'll let you, or I probably should defer to him first, do you think?
Sure.
Go ahead, Councilman Tates, I'm sorry.
I'd like to hear about ongoing costs, because this is something, $30,000 a year is what I've heard in the past, and sounds very optimistic to me. And I'd like to hear justification why we think that maintenance costs would be $30,000 a year.
First of all, the estimate was put together by our facilities maintenance department, and with assistance by the Public Works Department, and they analyze what the cost is, average cost for energy, water, maintenance of landscaping, mowing, snow removal, everything based on the average cost of our facilities that we own and the costs that we pay for all these things. That amounted to approximately $30,000, and that amount is what we received from facility maintenance and Parks and Rec Department. I do have all of that in detail. If you would like to look at that information, I can certainly provide that. That cost also will be offset by a lease agreement with Amtrak. Amtrak will pay a lease rental, if you will, for use of the facility, and that operation and maintenance would also be offset by any agreements that might be entered into for vendors who might provide some services there.
Madam Mayor, just a quick reminder, in this process, we have to remember that we don't have final design yet. Like, we are 40% design?
That is correct, only 40%.
We're 40% design, so we're making estimates off of, without having we don't have the exact design for what this building and site will be.
So at this point, why don't we have, I mean, we're 3 weeks away or 4 weeks away from a final decision. Why don't we have final design for it? I mean, I'm just asking
Because
in terms of logistics.
the funding we received, the approximate $8.5 million, is to do just that, the final design.
So we have to pay for it before we know what's in it. I heard something like that somewhere else, I think.
So we won't know what it costs until after we approve it. I mean, I'm just trying to get this in my head.
To know the exact cost will be when we bid the project out and it comes to City Council to award the bid. Then you will know the exact cost. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes.
Benedict?
And as I said, these are estimates, they're budget amounts, and engineers, myself included, when we prepare these estimates, we don't base it on the exact improvement because we don't know exactly what it's going to be. It's an approximation of what that improvement is going to cost. Is it on the high side? I would say yes, of course it is. We never, as an engineer, want to estimate low and come out high and have to pay the difference. And if you notice the contracts that go before council for various road, water, and sewer improvements, we are typically 5 to 10, sometimes even 20% under what our estimate is, and that's how we budget based on the estimate, but we build based on the bid amount.
Can I ask the question why the private sector hasn't stepped up? If the supply and demand would be so attractive for us to invest money that we don't have on a project of this magnitude, why hasn't the private sector stepped up and said, this is really a good idea, I think I will invest in this?
I really have no way of responding to that unless...
So that's one of the concerns that I have, if it
As
is
an
such a
engineer,
great
I just
idea.
don't have...
Can I ask
That's
a
beyond my
big picture
realm.
question as
Sure.
well? Since we're talking big picture, it seems to me that you know, looking at the photographs of the actual building that's there and the lack of parking, that we could enhance that and put
There's
a
no
parking
building there.
structure. Well, no, there's a lean-to, if you want to call it that, whatever that screen, that enclosure is. Why couldn't we enhance that and add parking and, you know, a couple other frills for, you know, a few $100,000 and see if the business will come there or the ridership will improve, and then maybe add a multimodal station when we get tracks down Woodward or improved.
As it's explained in the environmental assessment, number one, there's no land to do that. The entire area surrounding the existing station is developed with condo mixed-use development. There's literally no room to do that. There's no room to establish any additional parking or to build a building. Any of that. And that's
A follow-up to that is one of the commenters tonight, and he was pro the transit center, made mention that, you know, if Troy becomes the leader here, then all others will follow. Well, you know, we're in a position where we're being presented with an option to spend $8.5 million on a 2,400 square foot building, and all these riders are going to show up that aren't here now. And that's a real leap of faith. As a business owner, and I've started a lot of people into business, you don't hit the ground running, you build your business. And that's what I guess what I am conflicted about this whole project with. We don't have the ridership. We don't have trains coming down Woodward. We don't have the infrastructure. We really don't have a city that people want to go to, Detroit right now. You know, it would be great if it was Chicago or Cleveland, but it's Detroit. So, you know, the cart is before the horse here, and that's the biggest thing that I grapple with on this whole project. Is $8.5 million going to get us where we want to be?
In addition to that, I would try to explore the opportunity cost or the lost opportunity cost if we put a 2,400 square foot transit center that has all these food options that we're speaking of? What is it going to do to our little restaurants in the community when people are just going to go to the train center, eat, ride off to a different city of a destination we're unknown at this point, and so are we going to actually hurt local businesses with this transit center after we put our children and grandchildren into debt for $8.5 million? And we don't know that there's going to be the ridership, and where's the rider? Where are these people coming from, and what are they coming here for? What is this business versus pleasure? What's your percentages? I'd like to know your game plan or your proposal in terms of who exactly is going to use this. Now, I've heard a lot of young people come up and say they don't like cars anymore, and this is something for the future. You know what I would really rather do as a council, as a city, a leadership city, I would like to lead ourselves out of this economic crisis that we're in by reinvigorating what we have in existence rather than making this great leap of faith. And then we will provide our children 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road with a good economy so they themselves can build a transit center to their liking. I would just as soon we fix what we've got right now. But that's my opinion.
Sure, and if I may, Your Honor, and council members and staff and audience, and that is that your job is harder than my job, okay? Your job is to allocate community values on behalf of the 85,000 people that live here and the 120,000 people that work here on behalf of the residents in the private sector. My job is just to say, okay, you passed a resolution, I'm going to do this. And there's questions being asked that staff and myself cannot answer. We don't know what the impact is going to be on restaurants. We could perhaps put a call to the community and see, what they have to say, the people that actually own restaurants. We can't really take baby steps on this matter because there's a December 19th drop dead date, and we really can't accordion or time compress all the different elements that are involved to spend the money 2 years from now. So it's really, it's up to you. We'll answer the questions that we can, but I think there's always going to be questions that you're going to have to garner on your own and state your position and then act accordingly.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem McGinnis?
A couple of things to say, and it's a little bit different than what we've heard at the table so far. First of all, I'm not sure, I didn't check before the meeting tonight, but I wanted to make sure that all of the new council members and the new mayor got a copy of the master plan. And I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read through it, but there's a point that I think that we often miss when we're talking about the transit center, and it's the issue of ridership. And we have this number of riders that come now, and if we divide it by this many days, and it's only this many people, and is there really a value? And I think that in 2008, when the master plan was finalized, that question is really answered, and we talk a lot about wanting to be representative of the people, and that's all of the people in our community and the businesses and all the people that come to work here and all the people that may choose to live here or bring their businesses here sometime in the future. And it very clearly states in here that this transit component is important to our community. And I know that there's going to be an argument here that the times have changed and budgeting issues have changed, but I think it's very important to note that the money that we're utilizing on this transit center is not going to take away from the other functions of government that we have to provide. And you know what, if we could have a discussion here whether or not we would build the transit center or we would all get to divide up the $8.5 million and send it back to the people in our community or the state, there may be a different argument to be had. But I think that we can state with pretty good certainty that if we decide not to do this project, that the money will still be for this type of project and it will go somewhere else. More than likely it will go to another community that then we're going to compete against somewhere in the future. And I think it's really important for people to take a look at what is in the master plan because it's what was adopted. I consider it a very good compass of what our community values are. And I think it also addresses the issue of this isn't just one decision that we've decided, hey, we've heard transit's great and it's the new hip thing, so we want to build a transit center. I think that there were a lot of decisions that we talked about doing when the master plan was discussed and the community came together and priorities were set. And there are other things that we have done between now and then that are forwarding these same goals. I mean, we've just approved a brand new zoning ordinance that's light years ahead of other communities, and it is putting forward some of these same values. We're changing the way that we're zoning, we're looking at it in a different concept, and it's something that will be supported by transit. So all of these components fit together, and I think that when we're deciding how we want to move forward with this project, we have to look at it in the context of the other community values that we've heard are important to the people of the city of Troy and important to the businesses. So I would just implore everyone, if they haven't had an opportunity to review this, to read it, to kind of look at things in the big picture, and you can make arguments, for or against what you see here. And I know that you may want to make arguments about different times and different economic times, and I'm willing to listen to them, but I think if we're going to have a decision about what community values are, we should at least listen to what the community said to us. There's a lot of hard work that was put into this, and I think it's important that we listen to it. So,
How are you defining community? I mean, was it 75,000 people or 12 people?
no, it was not 75,000 people, but it was a very extensive process, and you can look through. I mean, if you look through
100 people? I'm just wondering, was it 100 people that worked on that? I mean, I'm just, because you're saying community, I'm just trying to define community.
We've got a list. There were several different components that were divided up, and each component had a number of different people from the community, business leaders. They had a wide array of people, and they had a wide array of people working on a variety of issues that came together. And I think if you look through the names of the people that worked on each part, you're going to see a lot of people that we interact with on a daily basis on all sides of the issue. So
I have looked through that, by the way. I didn't want you to think that I haven't. I have looked through that, yeah.
I wasn't assuming anyone did. I just wanted to make a statement about the importance that I think is in here. And I don't know if Mark Miller wants to explain a little bit more. I obviously wasn't on council in 2008, so I'm recreating history from what I read and I ask about.
Madam Mayor and Council, just really quick, there was an extensive citizen input portion to the master plan process, which included a variety of different means of getting that, and I would say hundreds of people were contacted, and every single person who had supplied their email with Vision 2020, which was extensive also, were asked to participate, and it was open. There were workshops open to whoever wanted to attend. So hundreds would be a fair statement.
Okay. Councilman?
I've been pouring through information that has been sent from a lot of different areas, but here's something interesting. According to SEMCOG traffic data, approximately 5,000 vehicles daily travel on I-75 from the northern suburbs towards downtown Detroit. So if we extract 257 of those to put them into a transit center, we only have 49,743 cars going to Detroit. This is not the answer to the Detroit's transit problem, or that has been here for decades and decades and decades. The people mover is struggling. I just think that the numbers are insignificant for us to want to throw $8.5 million at.
Councilman Teets?
One of the big concerns I have is that we're really on the tail end of the whip on this issue. I mean, we're at the Smart Bus. They've quit the Dial-A-Ride in Troy. I think it's 460 or 490 route that runs through up John R. and around Oakland Mall has been shut down. DDOT's in trouble. I mean, this is within the last, since the 13th of November. And I guess the fact that we haven't been considering these factors, that, the smart system is changing, and we're really putting ourselves at risk. In the same way, Amtrak is a highly political issue. And the funding of Amtrak goes like this, according to which party is controlling, appropriations in D.C. And to say that the funding of Amtrak 10 years from now is going to be the same as it is right now, it's very foolish. In fact, in 2 years from now, hopefully it's not the same as it is right now. And so I think for us to do these projections, we have to be realistic, because it really depends on who's allocating, who's setting budgets at the federal level, who's setting budgets in Detroit and regionally. And to comment on something that Councilman Henderson said, really, this isn't a transit center being built for someone driving from, or would have been, going from Bloomfield Township down to Detroit, because this is an Amtrak station, or would be an Amtrak station, until some point in the future, which we don't know about, where they would build a Woodward trolley. I can't even remember what the right name of it is. Anyhow, for the foreseeable future, this will be an Amtrak station that goes 3 times towards Detroit, 3 times back towards Port Huron or Pontiac, thank you. And so we need to keep it in perspective what this actually is. It's a bus station. In the short term, if it was built tomorrow, it would be the following. It would be a bus station, it'd be an Amtrak station, and there would potentially be a cab pick up and drop off. To say that it's a part of a larger plan, yeah, I mean, maybe in 20, 25 years, those lines that are up on the map will all have filled in. But right now, in 5 years, in 10 years, those lines will not have filled in. And that's, you can say, well, Doug, that's your opinion. But looking at where the budget is as far as the state budget, it's looking at as far as what other municipalities can afford, to say that we're going to be first, we may be first and the last as far as building something like this. Because President Obama, if he would be reelected, will not have the ability, or maybe he would, to give him the benefit of the doubt, to hand out more stimulus money to more and more municipalities to build these sorts of transit centers. That's why we're doing this. If you asked tomorrow if we had none of the stimulus money or sitting around, would we build this transit center? The answer would be no, because it's not one of our highest priorities. We're stripping some of the key, parts of our city. Our police has been stripped down, where we don't have the same force that we did a couple years ago. There are other aspects of our city that aren't what they were a couple years ago. So the question is, it doesn't matter what we were talking about 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Again, it's not a debate of sunk cost, because you can't make that sort of decision making when it's this. You have to look forward. And looking forward, the marginal benefit, I just don't see it, versus the marginal cost, where we will have ongoing liability. There will be some type of ongoing liability. $30,000 seems a very optimistic number to me. And the fact that we're going to be trying to bring in vendors and things like that, that's good. I mean, that makes sense. But again, we're going to be creating new government-sponsored businesses. We're going to be taking rental cars and taking them away from their current leasers and bring them into the transit center. And so I have many, many concerns. And I think that it's a nice thing to do. It's a great thing to do. But to say that the money will be there to construct the whole thing doesn't make sense. We're building, in reality, an Amtrak station and bus station. And and for that matter, the smart buses are shrinking back. And I want to make sure I said December 12th at the smart system. That's when they announced they're eliminating the non-peak hours and weekends for the Route 460 for the John R. and Big Beaver, which is past ITT Tech and design technology, or international, the design technology, and then also eliminating the Troy-Birmingham dial ride. I think that we just need to be realistic that it's not there. So.
I think the most important word, that was very good. I think the most important word that I took out of what you said was risk. We don't know the risk. And the risk is too great in this fragile economy, as I see it, to build something that we don't know the exact structure. We're building a 2,400 square foot, I've got 2,400 square foot, I'm thinking of a Colonial on a street, in any one of the neighborhoods of Troy. A 2,400 square foot building, and we're supposed to have 50,000 people running through it at peak, or, I mean, this is a 50,000 annual figure, I'm assuming, but even you and I, we live in our houses that are 2,400 square feet, and we say, God, I don't have enough room for 2 adults and 3 kids. You don't have enough room. It just, the risk is so great to this project at this time that I think, as a leadership city, we should say, no, thank you. Why don't we suggest that the federal government take that $8.6 million and pay off some debt with it? I mean, that's what I would like to see the government do with $8.6 trillion.
I'm going to just real quick. The $8.6 million is going to get handed to somebody else. I mean, that's just, we all agree that that's, at least, I mean, it'll get handed to somebody else. But you know what? That's okay. Let them deal with the headache and pay for it down the line. Wisconsin, Ohio, Florida have all made the same decision I'm encouraging other people to make right now. And it's not because they have, you can't believe that all those states are foolish. The decisions they made there are decisions that were based on looking at the long-term costs of the free money, the stimulus money that was handed to them. That money's not free. The hold on is the long-term cost of maintaining that system. The long-term cost in 15 years, when you see all those lines made out on the map that was just shown to us, and that's available online. The long-term cost is, in 15 years, we'll have to look at renovating what we've currently built. There are just so many question marks in my head about this, and so that's where I'll leave it for the moment. I don't like it long.
Councilman Henderson?
I was emailed a couple of documents here, and it was about housing, because I've heard astronomical figures. It's going to increase residential market value by 200%. I mean, it's been that crazy, some of the numbers I've heard. And it's funny that she emailed me this, because in Atlanta, for example, one of the train stations was put in, property value increased in low-income neighborhoods but decreased in high-income neighborhoods. That's not necessarily something that I would advocate for Troy. Property value between 1 to 3 miles of stations increased relative to comparable properties located more than 3 miles away. Properties within 1/4 mile decreased by 19% compared with properties beyond 3 miles. And on it goes. I mean, I highlighted all the negatives. There are very few positives as it regards increased property values, which is just another one of those things that we keep getting told it's going to increase property values in Troy. I'm not a believer, and this seems to substantiate that.
Councilman Fleming?
Just to be clear, I'm not one bit against and too proud to take federal money, period. We pay it in, we're taxpayers, we pay it in. We're entitled to get it back for the right reason. If we were getting $8.5 million they were handing us to improve our roads and streets here in Troy, it would be a slam dunk, because we would all take it. So don't say we won't take the money. It's for this project that we're talking about that we're having so much angst about. But we will take federal money. Troy is open to that because we pay dollars in. We're like a donor city. So it's this project that I'm having a struggle with, just trying to justify. What I'm looking for is, who is the engineer, or not engineer, I'm looking for the architect. This is an architectural decision on this building, not really an engineering decision, because architects do design and they do estimate. Who's the architect on this that's come up with this construction that's going to be $8.5 million? Have we had an architect look at it, or do we have an opportunity for an architect to take a look at this and give us a cost? Has that taken place? And do we have time to do that? Because I think there's a value in doing that at this point, to have an architectural design done, not an engineering study. The other concern I have, we say these are estimates, and I'm hoping that they're high estimates, because as I read the agreement with the government, if you go over this $8,485,212, we pay it. So we better know what the cost is going to end, and we better make sure that we can cover it. But I would have a better comfort level. I don't mind taking money from the government for the right reason, but on this project here, to me, in my mind, it's too expensive. So how do we have an architect look at this and tell us if this is reasonable or not? And I don't have that. Who can do that?
To answer your question, the engineer that prepared the estimate was our consulting engineers, Hubble, Roth, and Clark. They were engaged about a year and a half ago under an interlocal agreement between Troy and Birmingham, splitting the cost of that work. HRC has provided the preliminary design, the site layout, and the cost estimate for the project. We will, when we bring the contract to you for the architectural engineering services, we will in fact have a dollar figure, and we do have those dollar figures now from our consultants, but they're in sealed envelopes. And until we have to select the architect engineer based on qualifications, then we will open the envelope and see what the cost is.
I think there's a miscommunication
No,
here, Steve.
no,
I think that the costs that are sealed would be the architectural engineering fee. Is that
Architectural
correct?
engineering fee,
I think
right.
Mr. Fleming was asking about the actual cost of the individual components.
Okay.
Just to be clear, if I may, Mayor. Hubble, Roth, and Clark are great engineers. I mean, they do this. They do a lot of engineering work. Unless I'm wrong, they're not architects, unless they've gone out and hired an architect. They're trying to do an architect's job as an engineering firm. And I'm wondering if that may be part of the issue that we have here with this cost. Or am I wrong? Do they have architects?
They do have architects, yes. They've had architects for many, many years.
Here, Pro Tem McGinnis, you want to say something?
I just wanted to point out something else. You know, I know we're talking about this in different terminology, and you use the word risk, and I can see that, but I can also see this as something on a different plane, which would be more of an opportunity. And I would be concerned if it looked like this was the tail end of this, that at one point everybody was talking about transit, and we got to, you know, bring Michigan to the forefront, and we've got to make us competitive with these other major cities that have public transportation. And yet everyone else kind of saw the writing on the wall, and nobody was really talking about it anymore. And here we were with our grant just marching on no matter what because we got the money. But I feel like the conversation hasn't stopped. And in Michigan and across the country, it's still a huge priority. And the end of October, we just had our governor who's shown us in a very short period of time that when he wants to accomplish something, he's getting it done. When he's making something a priority, he's accomplishing it. Just made an announcement on October 26th or somewhere towards the end of October that this is going to be a huge priority for him, that he sees one of the disadvantages that Michigan has is having a lack of mass transit, and that this is going to be a priority for his administration. And we just heard a couple of weeks ago that our region was just given a grant to further explore what these opportunities were going to be for light rail transit along Woodward. So I'm not grasping at straws. I'm grasping at my 2008 straws because this is something that I share in this vision that's in the master plan. And so I want to continue to take what's in here very seriously. But we're continuing to hear these things, and we're continuing to hear people that are promoting that and still considering that priority number one. And so for that reason, I think it's still relevant.
Speaking of land, Birmingham backed out apparently, according to Mr. Vendette, because they couldn't acquire some land. Was that the only reason why Birmingham backed out of it? And what was the ramifications of this particular land that they couldn't get? And secondarily, my understanding is the land is still in, there's not a definitive answer as to the resolution of the lawsuits on this land. Grand Saqua might still at some point appeal it to a higher court, and it will be given back to them potentially. And then what happens?
As far as I can only speak to the land in Birmingham, Birmingham made several attempts to negotiate a price with the property owner. They ended up pretty much as how they began. They were miles and hundreds of $1,000s apart, and that was not a cost that the city of Birmingham was willing to absorb, and they were not willing to proceed with condemnation or eminent domain to.
See, I had heard that Birmingham was pressured by the citizens of Birmingham to back out of the project because the people of Birmingham didn't think it was a wise move. That's what I've heard anyway. You were going to say something?
Yeah, Mayor, yeah, I can just tell you the status currently of the lawsuits. And right now, we have prevailed on it. It was a donation that was negotiated as kind of the deal that the city got for Grand Saco being able to put in that very intense commercial mixed, residential mixed-use development. And the requirement in the consent judgment was that it be funded by June 2nd of 2010. And with the grants that have been received, the $8.3 million grant that has been received, it has been our position all along, which has been adopted so far by the Circuit Court, that is sufficient funding and that we had met conditions. And so they have currently they have a motion for reconsideration. So it was the Circuit Court. We prevailed at that point in time. They filed an appeal at of that decision. That was dismissed. They filed a motion for reconsideration. They may file an application for leave to appeal if they do not get their reconsideration granted.
Can you explain to us a little bit what their position is? I mean, what are they saying they have on their defense or on their behalf?
Their position is that the grant was not funding.
Okay.
It was not sufficient funding because it had to be cash in the bank is what their contention is. It had to be cash in the bank, which again, we would argue that it never was going to be cash in the bank. It's on a reimbursable basis. You would never just get $8.3 million from the federal government. You would have to earn all of that money.
Okay, that's interesting. It'd be interesting to hear what the ramifications of that are in terms of how it was defined to begin with.
It wasn't.
That's the problem. It wasn't defined. Okay.
Funded.
Okay. So there's more risk. There's more risk.
Again, we have prevailed. Certainly, there is a very slim chance that we could lose that lawsuit on appeal. And if that were to happen, then there are some different options as well that would be presented.
More expensive options, obviously, at that point.
Again, it's an uphill battle for Grand Saco. We have prevailed to date.
Right, with this risk, again. Did you want to say something, Councilman?
Yeah, just one thing regarding the property, because I did reach out to all the council people in Birmingham this past week to try to get more information on that, and every one of them stated that it was because of the lack of ability to get that property at a reasonable price. But what keeps going through my mind is, even as a business owner, if there is such a great thing out there that's going to bring $53 million in revenue to the city, what price is too much to pay for that piece of property? So again, I can't help but go to my business background and think, okay, well, so they wanted $900,000. Heck, why don't we buy at $900,000 and put a parking lot there? It would still be cheaper than the $8.5 million that we're spending. So I guess I think, like you, I think there's something else there that was prevailing to make them pull out. Secondly, with regard to our transit center, and if they do put tracks down Woodward cut right through the business district in the heart of Birmingham. What would keep them from building a transit center on Woodward and mothballing the Troy Transit Center at that time?
More risk. Well, I think that I would still like to suggest that we have another study session with the opposing point of view from the private sector in a presentation form that will lay out for all interested parties the downsides of it. We're all speculating. We all have read and understand a certain aspect. We have our own opinions, but I really think it would be beneficial not only to council and management and staff, but for the community to know that we're making a decision based on at least a good study or overview of what our options really are here. This has been a march forward project from the day I began to become interested in it. I think Mr. Savage said the same thing earlier this evening. It's just been a march forward process, and we haven't had the chance to look at the pros and cons.
It's like 12 years.
There you go. Yes, sir.
Ask the city manager here again. Is there any way before December the 19th, we could make sure that these costs are right, or these costs are too high with an architectural firm looking at? You say you've got the bids, you've got 5 bids or something. I don't know when you're opening those up, but I know those are just bids for the architectural service portion of it. I'm really wanting someone to look at this project again, other than Hubble, Roth, and Clark, from an architectural standpoint. Is this thing cost effective? Is there a way to cost reduce it? I'm looking for a way to salvage this, because this is going south. This is going nowhere tonight. And I'm looking for a way to say, is there a way to cost reduce this thing to make it, maybe we can give some money back to the federal government. Maybe, why do we have to spend the whole $8.5 million? Is there a way to do a transit center that's more cost effective? Our backs are against the wall here.
What I can do is ask Mark and Steve Vandet, Bill Hootering, our deputy city engineer, to get with Hubble, Roth, and Clark, because I wouldn't want to hire another architect and have to pay that architect money to do rework that was probably done years ago. But just to take a look at all the components that we spoke about before, the grading, site work, utility work, building, bridge, infrastructure, parking, platform, and segregate those elements with an estimated cost, maybe a range for those elements. We don't want to get, again, as Mr. Vandet said, you don't want to lowball it, because if we lowball it and the bids come in higher, then there's an issue that we have at that point. But to give an accurate assessment of what HRC, in conjunction with staff, because he has some excellent staff members as well, what they think those costs are, and come back to you. That's what we can do, I think, in a fairly, before December 19th, if you will. As far as engaging the community, that's always an option that the council has. I know the council had engaged the community many times in many issues. Some have been positive and some have not been positive. The negative one, from my perspective, was when there was a request for a wetlands ordinance, and we wound up with about 4,000 people opposed to it. But that was, we had to rent, I think, Troy High to hold the meeting. But the council wanted to consider a wetland ordinance, and they wanted to engage the community. I mean, you can do something similar. You can invite the community to a meeting, if you will, and people can come up and speak pro and con. That how you make a decision, it's really up to you. And our job is to provide you with the information that you need. We'll try to get the best estimates that we can, won't we, Mark?
Okay.
Yes.
On those elements,
Appreciate
and
that.
come
Yes.
back with you on that.
The one thing I will warn is that we have a project scope that's been approved.
Right.
And we executed a contract with MDOT, who is getting the funding through FRA, for a certain scope.
That scope is that scope contained in the site plan that was approved, essentially?
That's part of it, yes. I mean, and it's described the components which were being funded, and I would have some concern if we do dramatic redesign, we're just not going to be able, the funding we received is for the project which was presented today. And so I would ask Steve, if we change that scope, would that require changes with MDOT?
We would not be able to change the scope. For example, we could not eliminate the building. We could not eliminate the bus slips. All of that is part and parcel of the entire scope. If we were to do that, there would be some serious look at the project by the FRA to determine whether or not they would actually fund it.
Councilman Slater?
Well, that's the point I was going to make. Here we are 3 weeks from having to make a final decision, and I don't look at it as going south, okay? I've heard 3 council positions tonight that are negative. Now, it sounds to me like you're in favor of the project and its philosophy, as I am, and if it would come in at $5 million, you might be okay with it. But maybe you just need to be satisfied that the $8.4 million is being spent wisely. At least that's what I thought I heard. To me, what hasn't been mentioned tonight is the business community. and they are 100% in favor of this. The chamber is in favor of it. I haven't heard one business person come up and say they're not in favor of this. And that's what I'm trying to reach out to, is the businesses, to bring business in, to make it better for the business community. And it just seems to me that that tips it for me, okay? Because I don't see the downside tipping it in the other direction for me, okay? I haven't heard anything that would tip it for me because of the business area. I think that's what we really need to really focus on. This project is good for business. And I just can't get that out of my mind. Now, I have some concern with the 8.4 million, but I have no idea what this project costs, and I'm relying on the experts to tell me what the costs are. And I think I have to, if I'm in favor of the project, I have to say, okay, I have to trust the outside entities that they're managing the budget properly. It just makes sense to me that they wouldn't do that. Unless I'm missing something. Because I think there's checks and balances here. And it's not us that is doing the checks and balances. I think it's who's going to oversee this project. And I think it makes sense to lowball it. You know, maybe it's going to cost $6 million. That would be great. Then the government gets back $2.4 million. And I think that's the way I'm going to look at it, unless I haven't heard anything tonight that tips me away from doing this for the business community.
So if there was a possibility that we could find 25 businessmen in the community that would come in here and say they're opposed to it, with a perspective that you would be able to understand as being as valid as the business perspective that's for it, because I have to believe that there's a business sector in this community that is not for a transit center, and I'm just thinking we haven't heard of them. We haven't heard from them. You're right, and that goes along with my desire to have a study session that is dedicated to hearing the opposing point of view. That's exactly why we haven't heard it, but I don't think it doesn't exist just because we haven't heard it.
I think we've heard it every meeting. I mean, how can you sit there and say we haven't heard it?
Well, and you're right.
Right?
You're
And
right.
to call another expert, I know I read the resume of the gentleman you mentioned. It's a very impressive resume, but I don't see where he knows anything about a transit center or anything about manufacturing a building. I don't see where you put him up as an expert, other than the fact he doesn't like it. I mean,
I didn't put him up as an expert.
Oh, you
I put
did.
him up as, well, I didn't put him up as an expert, excuse me. I put him up as a gentleman who has been studying this issue for years and who has brought his point of view to the table that I think offers us an opportunity to see the full scope. Whatever the decision is, if we don't have the full scope of information, then we're doing ourselves a disservice as well as the community. And this is too big of an issue for us to just assume that because 25 business people are in favor of it, there aren't 25 business people that are opposed to it. And yes, we've heard people come up to the podium meeting after meeting talking against it, and then another group comes and talks for it. So, you know, this is only going to be so good as long as we want to be patient enough to listen to everybody. We have to finally make a decision. But I'm telling you, I'm not in a position to make a decision until I see the full scope. I want to see it, that's all.
Anyway, to Mr. Slater's point, the Chamber of Commerce speaks as one voice. As they have a board that gets together, that's their decision. Certainly don't speak for every member in the Chamber of Commerce, because I know members of the Chamber of Commerce that are adamantly opposed to this transit center. And yes, they haven't come to council and said anything, but they just don't support it. So does that mean they're not chamber members anymore, or they're going to quit the chamber? No, but it certainly doesn't mean that the chamber speaks for them. And I know people that don't belong to the Chamber of Commerce that own businesses in Troy, and a lot of them, and they're not in favor of the transit center. And simply because they don't come to the council and present that idea to council does not mean that there's not support for getting rid of this off the council table.
So all I think is we need full disclosure.
Well, I don't have any problem with that. This isn't new to some of us that are on council, and I've done my homework, and I looked at this project. I've read everything that was given to you in the last few weeks, or last few days, I should say. I know Councilwoman McGinnis has read everything, and I know Councilwoman Fleming has too. So this isn't something that I need to digest. This was a meeting for the new council to bring you up to date as to what was going on. I'm confident that I have all the data that's necessary for me. Okay, but I'll be happy to listen to whatever you want.
Is there any other discussion?
Well, I'd like to hear the opposing view if there's whoever, and if there are other businesses that are not for this, because I'll tell you, I reached out, well actually seeking me out, and I was available, to chamber members and asked them basically to put in writing their business case for this. Give it your best shot, you know. And some didn't. You've got communications from them. Not a lot, but we have a few. But I think we need to hear the voice of the business community, and not just a few. But if we've got other people in the business community that have opposing views, it would be great to hear that. But I can tell you that from what the Economic Development Council, part of the chamber, and they're for this transit center. But to try to justify it economically, no business person can. They can't show a return on the investment. But it seems to be the right thing to do, and I think the popular opinion is, well, we use it now or we lose it, so let's use it. And again, as I said before, if this were going to roads, it would be a slam dunk. But it's not, and we can't divert it to that. So I think you're right. If you want to have another meeting with more business people, because that's who it impacts more than the residents, I believe. It's the businesses. And that, are we doing our businesses a disservice by not having a transit center? Or is it going to be neutral? And then my concern is, this cost is just too high. I've looked at the projected ridership right from the information we provided. 25,000 in 2012, rising to 51,500 in 2017. That's basically an average of 38,000 riders a year over 15 years. So 15 times 38,000 is 572,000 riders are going to ride this thing, projected over the next 15 years. You divide that into $8.5 million, and that says every rider that gets on that train, we're writing a check for $14.83. And if they do a round trip, because I think you have to get back where you started, it's $29.66. Every rider that rides this thing is being supplemented just for the capital cost. Now they're going to pay a fee. On top of that, Amtrak's going to get a subsidy from the government probably. But just taking the numbers that we have, and I hope you're saying that you think 571 is too many people to go through that transit center. I hope it's 10 times that, because then it would make more sense, because you're moving traffic through there. But the ridership projection is so slow, so low, that it's insignificant when compared to the total cost. When you look at it, almost $30 for a person that uses it two ways. For the next 15 years, every person that steps on that train and does a round trip, this fee we just paid $30 for. That seems high to me.
Along those lines, $22 it takes, I think, right now for a round trip to Detroit and back. So if we're actually going to rely on employees coming from wherever that is along that rail, that amount of money per day turns out to be about $400 a month, which is a nice used car payment and gas.
Just some advice, and you can do what you like.
Sure.
But it may be in order. I'm looking out for your interests, essentially. Having a call to the public to hear arguments against a transit center, you might want to have a call to the public to have their opinion on a transit center. That way you're not blocking out those that would be in favor of it.
Right.
I don't think the community would like to have this council have a meeting to have people just come to a meeting in favor of the transit center. I think there should be a balance.
But we already have that meeting just for people who are favoring the transit center, and that's the presentation from the city. The city favors the transit center. No, that's a given. Do we agree with that? The city favors the transit center.
City council.
The city management
No,
favored.
I'm sorry.
The city council, the previous
determines-
city
yes.
council
And-
favored a transit
And we're
center.
telling you where we are.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that if you have a call to the public to have only those that are opposed to a transit center show up, I don't know if it's going to look very well. That's all I'm saying. That's up to you. I mean, it's your gig. All I'm giving you is my advice, having worked with many mayors and council members, that if there's a call to the public, I don't think you can preclude someone from talking at that meeting in favor of it. So you might as well invite them. And that's just,
Yeah.
so it's up to you.
Just a question as far as dynamics. You're looking to do another study session. You've only got 2 more meetings. Well, I guess you've got December 5th, and then you need a decision on the 19th, so you have next week. So what are you looking to do as far as your presentation? Are you looking to do something like we did with the wetlands ordinance, where you open it up to all of the residents to come in, come in and provide their input, or are you looking, what are you looking to do, and how are we going to facilitate that?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the wetlands issue, but I kind of think that's a good way of approaching it. I mean, it might be cumbersome and time-consuming, but if we had the community center and a room or something, and we had a large audience, and people were able to bring in PowerPoint presentations, a 10-minute presentation here, a 15-minute presentation there, I wouldn't be opposed to that, because I just think that information for a new council especially, I know there are people who have their minds set, and quite frankly, I think we all kind of have our minds set, but I'm simply trying to say, let's get the full scope of it.
Sure. And if I may, Your Honor, it wouldn't be a study session per se. It would just be essentially a call to the public to present to the council their viewpoints on a transit center. Because the study session is very formal procedure,
Right.
where this is a study session.
Yeah.
I talk to you and staff, and you tell me what to do. If you want to get more input from a grassroots level, I think it would be in order to call essentially just a meeting, you may want to call it a town hall meeting, if you will, to invite the public. That's what we did with the wetlands ordinance when, if I'm mistaken, thousands of people showed up, didn't they?
It was at Athens, and it was
Yeah.
filled, and
But John, I think that was a public meeting. I was one of the presenters.
Okay.
It was like my first month here.
Well, time did my memory on that. It was a call to the public to speak as well, though.
But that was it was like a public hearing. I mean, it was a council meeting. Council sat there, but then I made a presentation. I think Stephen made a presentation, and then 1,000 people spoke. In fact, so many people spoke it couldn't
See,
even
this has
contain.
gotten much bigger than what I anticipated. I only anticipated one other person giving the opposite presentation to Mr. Vendette's presentation. That was my initial thought to begin with, and now it's kind of expanded into a gigantic town hall, but I'm not opposed to that.
well, I think if you open it up to one person, you have to open it up to everyone equally to be able to comment. So, I mean, if that's what council wishes to do, you probably should plan appropriately for that.
Okay. Councilman Teets?
I have a concern about starting down this path, because this is a representative body. We're elected to represent the people. And at times, yes, there will be an issue that is new or different to this body. But I was elected a couple weeks ago. This issue has existed for 10 years. This is not a surprise to anyone that this issue is at this point of the process. And so to me, doing an event like that isn't necessarily a good use of our time and resources. And in the same way, it sets a precedent that for when a decision gets tough, that we're not going to just sit here and make decisions. We're hired to make decisions, and one thing that I've heard repeatedly is people are frustrated that the city council doesn't sit down and make decisions. And I don't want to say it's punting, but it sure is a long pass to say that, you know what, let's go hear what the people say. Because I've done research on this personally. I've listened to people that agree, disagree, otherwise. And it's our responsibility as people that sit on this council to do that. And if you don't feel like you're doing a good job, you don't want other people's opinion or so forth. And in the same, there's one other point. if we start giving people more than 5 minutes per person, we're setting a precedent that someone's opinion is more important than someone else's opinion. I think that is just a negative thing, because it gives a perception that I favor somebody else's representation or spot in democracy more than I favor someone else. Agree or disagree. In this case, I think I would agree with this gentleman about the transit center having some issues. But going forward, are we going to have to poll and try to find someone for every side of each issue? I just think it's an unhealthy thing, and I believe that if you want to come and speak, council comments are a great place to do it. You have that opportunity, and I think a lot of people do a great job in 5 minutes of providing lots of data. And in the same way, we all receive email. I got 1 or 2 phone calls this week, contact from people providing me with oodles of data. And just like Councilman Henderson pointed out, great data. And so citizens have a way of reaching us. I'm not detached from the world, and I don't think any of us are. And so those are my major concerns with us going forward. I can't speak to the wetlands thing. I think I may have been 2 years old when that happened. but I think when it comes to this sort of thing, I mean, we just got to button up and do it. And that's why, I wanted to do this now, because do a study session, and maybe tonight's not the night to make the decision. But we're hired to do this. If we're just going to say, well, that has been something I've heard during the campaign, and something that personally I don't feel comfortable with if I just don't make decisions. So.
Mayor Pro Tem
Really quickly, because I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that kind of input has its place, and I just don't think that at the tail end of 12 years and 2 weeks before we're at the deadline to make a decision is the right place to do it. I know I don't feel like my back's up against the wall. I'm kind of getting the impression from listening to people tonight that we might as well just vote on it now, because it sounds like, at least to some extent, some people have already made up their minds, and that's okay. I would hope that with our varying degrees of involvement on this, most of us here at the table would have a pretty good understanding of where we feel we would fall on that side of the vote. So I'm not saying anything negative about that, but I think that there will come the time, like when we were discussing the library millage, that was a brand new issue that we were dealing with a full council, and we made a decision that when we got into those discussions, that was at that time and place, at the beginning of that, we wanted to reach out and set up those community conversation sessions, and we did it from the get-go so that we could take that information and use it when we made our determinations, and it worked at that time and place. And I'm hoping in the future there will be issues that kind of discussion or meeting where it's open to the public and everyone can come and discuss things with us in that kind of forum. I'm hoping that there may be a time to do that, but I just don't think that at the tail end of 12 years and 2 weeks before we need to make a final decision, when I really think that for the most part all of us have done our due diligence and have had the ability to talk to people about the issue so that we feel educated to make a decision, I don't think it's the time to start that. So that's
first of all, I would like to say we're not hired, we're elected, and we're elected to represent people. Certain people elected me to represent what they believe, and I have to say that in the 12 years that this has been going on, it's been a one-sided argument. That's the only thing I'm going to say. I'm going to let it drop. If everybody wants to vote on it, because I'm just one other vote, and I know that, and I'm just saying people elected me to stand up for some values that we have, and I need those values at least given an opportunity to be presented in a public forum without opposition. We don't stop the other side. We don't stop the pro-transit center program from going forward and from being given airtime and funds and agendas and meetings. We don't ever stop that. I'm just simply saying, if we do this without allowing the other side an opportunity, and there has not been the other side having an opportunity, I don't care if it's been 12 years or 25 years, the other side has not had a formal opportunity to present the facts that as they see them. So that's my point. I'm here as a representative of the people, and I want to make sure that people know the full scope of things before I make a decision of this magnitude. Look at how long we did argue about the library and discuss and debate and go back and forth. 3 votes, the whole 9 yards over a $3 million library, and now we're looking at a $8.6 million transit center that we don't know the design. We don't have any way of capping the costs. We know that if we don't cap the costs, and I've never seen a federal federal government project that stayed under budget. Never have I seen it, never. If it goes over budget, it's our dime. That's all I want to say for now. Yes, sir.
To their point, both, to have a big meeting at some facility to have everybody in the city, why don't we just give them ballots and they can vote on whether or not they want a transit center? I just think that's a ridiculous way to go. We to Doug's point, we were, Councilman Doug, we were elected to represent the people, and I have marching orders. I know what the people were talking about when I went door to door. I've been involved in various blogs and internet activities over the last 2 years. There's no question in my mind what people that elected me have to say about this. So I don't think there's any need to go with outside information. I presented all the negatives I can think of tonight.
Yes, sir.
To Councilman Slater's point, we've heard a lot walking door to door from individuals. I've had just a few emails from businesses. So what are the businesses really feeling? You're saying there are businesses that don't want the transit center, okay? The businesses I've talked to, mainly the chamber, are in favor of a transit center, But I'd be interested in hearing if there are businesses that don't want, and why. What's the logic for not wanting it, a transit center? I'd be interested to know that. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm okay to have someone come and make a presentation. I don't have a hang-up about that.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
We need to make a decision, though, before we leave. What are we doing?
Mrs. Bittner, how do we do this now? I mean, how do we go back into the council chambers? We can't can we take a vote here? I don't think that's...
You can get consensus. If there is consensus, you certainly can, if there is consensus. Otherwise, I mean, the only thing that's going to be happening is on the agenda for the 19th. Absent anything else, you're going to have those 2 resolutions.
Well, prior to that, I made some notes. I'm going to get all the cost components that I can on the various elements. I'm going to get all the folks here, put it on the website, the PowerPoint presentation, and try to pen down the O&M costs and the rationale for that. Aside from that, I think I was asked to do nothing else. The issue that you have before you is if you want to have another study session on this matter, or have people in the audience come and talk to you. I mean, where do you want to go as a governing body next? And we'll need direction, from the majority on that point.
Councilman Fleming, what's your thought on the business community coming before us in a study session or in public comments? What are your thoughts?
Public comment.
Public comments?
It's just fine. We've got a forum for that. We don't need to have a special meeting or whatever. I think the next meeting we have in public comment, if we've got businesses that are for it, they should say businesses that are against it. And you can't in this business, as a council, just count noses, but you've got to get a perspective. Listen for what's different. If you get the same message 10 times, okay, that's one message. If you get another perspective from a different business, from a different angle, you need to understand. There may be people in this town that are really looking forward to a transit center that can see exactly how it's going to add employees, how it's going to help their students or whatever. I know I've seen emails on that. There may be others that say, I don't want it because. I have not heard that side. Maybe you have. I haven't. And if you've got someone that wants to come and make a quick presentation on their opinion, fine. But I really do think, like Councilman Teets, that we've got a 5-minute limit and let's treat everybody the same. But we should do it the next meeting. We've got a meeting coming up. We should do it the next meeting. And I'm hoping, I know this is probably not going to happen, my wish that people won't just say the same thing over and over, but if you've got a different story, some different logic, pro or con for a transit center, that's what I'd like to hear, just so that the whole council hears it. Then we have to make a decision, and let's move on with life.
Right. So now what do we do to get back in the council?
Just recess.
Just recess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Recess and go back.
Meeting's recessed, we're back in the council. Bud Chambers, thank you. We're on the council referral portion of the meeting, and there were some items brought up. I'm not entirely sure how to address them. Do I just go off of the attachment page and kind of say what's on the attachment, or Manager Zerlich, please?
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of council. What we do is that when there's a request essentially from any member of council to save time, I'll present it, if requested, as a council referral item, and that way the entire council can decide how they want to handle something. What it avoids is that if a councilperson wants to do something and then someone else calls and wants to do something else, then we go nuts. So, regardless of the issue, if there's a change to a policy that we have, I'll be putting it on the agenda if requested by the mayor or the council, essentially for your consideration. And at that point, you can do what you like with it. On some of these items, we have a little supplement to it. For example, on the to-do list, we do have an application used by staff when we get work requested via phone or email from residents, and that was attached as well as a template. So, but again, what you do with these items essentially is up to the governing body.
Graham, again, I don't have I have attachments 3, 4, and 5, but I didn't have attachment 1 and 2.
Attachment 1 was the procedural reference guide.
What do we have to do with that? Is that the rules of procedure? We don't have to do anything with that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Shuffling around with my
No,
papers.
attachment 1 was essentially a guide to help you in council, the new members and even the old members, to get a primer on how we handle things. That was attachment 1. Attachment 2 was the rules of procedure that were postponed, that have been essentially redlined, that came from you. And then attachment 3.
My to-do list, my taxpayers'
Yes.
to-do list.
Yes, ma'am. There's a template there as well as a work order that we have that we've used for years.
Basically, what the concept is with the taxpayers' to-do list is, as I had mentioned earlier in council comment, or reply to comments, I'm going door to door every Saturday to get a little bit of knowledge of the people and maybe bring some goodwill to the community. And in doing so, I've found there's a lot of little things that people say they want us to do that might make a big difference in how the people feel about the government and the city that they live in. For example, there's a doctor who lives on Livernois, and there's a sign for the Troy Museum and the Historical Society, and it's right in front of a vacant house. And she said, I look out there every day and I get mad because that sign is in the wrong place. And I've asked the city, and I haven't gotten an answer. Could we just move that sign to be in front of the entrance to the museum? And I'm thinking, there's a doctor who is a well-educated woman, probably talks to a lot of her neighbors or her, associates at the hospital. And if that sign were to be just cut off, fixed, and moved over to where it really should be, we might build some synergy of positive. I like the city of Troy. They took care of the sign. And I know that's one small issue, and it's not as big an issue as the transit center or the library or the funding, but it's just those 1,000 little ways that maybe we can make our community happier. And I think that that's the idea, the gist behind my taxpayers' to-do list. And also in that regard, I would like to use this to educate the citizens on the process of what we go through. Maybe moving a sign as one example isn't a big issue, but maybe one of the other issues might cost us $10,000, and we don't have the budget for it, but we can say that we looked at it. Here's the pro, here's the con, this is why we can't do it, this is the department that you might work with if in fact you want to further this is a contact number, and this is our resolution. So it's kind of a rolling list just to let the people know that we're actively concerned about their issues. And that was my idea. I don't know if the council would consider something like that. Any conversation or comments or questions?
I'm just wondering for city management, we have something like that now, do we? City work sample?
We have
I'm not sure every department has it. How could we facilitate that?
Well, whenever we get a call, the department, I'll back up. What we've done essentially is we've flattened the organization. We had to do that when we cut a third of our full-time employees out of the picture, if you will. And so we have pockets of individuals that interact and have the responsibility and the authority to accommodate, or I don't want to say accommodate, to respond to requests. And we keep track of that. Normally, requests that we get pertain to zoning ordinance violations of other people. You know, someone will complain that there's an untidy issue on someone else's property, and we'll send the zoning code enforcement officer there. If someone has an issue with the city per se, like a sign issue, we don't. Those issues are far and few between. If someone has a problem, I wasn't aware of the museum issue, and what we try to do is to educate the residents that essentially there's a hierarchy, if you will, and if the person feels that they've got a grievance with the city on something the city controls, then it can go all the way up the chain of command up to and including myself, and then if the resident or property owner does not like my decision, then it can go to the city council as well. Other areas are pretty well black or white. You know, we have our ordinances, which means that you either have to do something or you can't do something, and it would take an ordinance change to modify that. Let's say that someone builds a structure without a permit, and there's a complaint from a neighboring property owner. As a matter of course, we keep that complainant anonymous and just go there and say, you know, we've had a concern. So, you know, we're all for having to make sure that nothing gets lost through the cracks. I would say that if any of you have an issue that was brought to your attention, if you could let you know, the appropriate department know about it, or I've got an office coordinator, Beth Tashnik, if she could be made aware of it, we'd make sure that it was followed up on, and the council would get a copy of that automatically. But I think we get maybe, I'm going to ask Mark, how many requests do you think we get in the course of a year?
I don't want to venture to guess. I apologize.
My guess it would be thousands of requests that we get a year to follow up or do something. And but again, there's times when residents want to be anonymous. They wouldn't want to be placed. They wouldn't want to have their name on a website.
I wouldn't put names. This would be issue. This would be issue oriented. It's just and basically, to me, if you know, on the one hand, you say there's only like one person that might call about a sign per se, and then there's thousands of people that call with complaints, but most of them are zoning complaints. I mean, so
a lot of them are zoning. A lot of them are road complaints too. You know, there's a you know, a pothole in this area here. There's a sidewalk deflection over there, and those are things that we address. Very rarely do we get a complaint that the city is doing something and they feel aggrieved by it, if you will. I'm concerned that, you know, I'll look into personally the sign issue at the museum. I'm sorry, Mark Miller will look into that personally. He's on the sign issue for the museum, and because that's a little bit different now. That's a 501c3, if you will, that runs the place. And we have no employees that directly report to us. So at times there might be a miscommunication where someone would think that the museum reports to the city manager when in reality they now report to the Historical Society.
See, this is exactly the kind of dialogue that I think is important with this idea of a taxpayer's to-do list, if you will, because most people wouldn't know that the museum is a 501(c)(3) and it's not reporting to you. So this is an opportunity not just for us to be burdened with a million little tasks to do for people, but an opportunity to let people know how the process works in an open forum. You know, I know you say there's the city works, and there is always a way to reach somebody to make a complaint or file a request for something, but if we, from my perspective, I have 9 issues, So, it's kind of important to me that I have some kind of a forum to bring it to the people's attention, to bring it to your attention, to bring it to Mark's attention, to the other council members' attention, and just be able to say, these are some of the things that the people care about, and this is what we can do, and this is the route we're going to take, and make it a more public notice kind of a thing. But, maybe it's a whim of mine, I'm being whimsical again, but if everybody thinks it's a bad idea, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with my 9 issues is I'm going to use the forum, and I'm going to develop it a little bit more, and then maybe I'll bring it back, and if people think it's worthwhile, we could do something with it, if not.
And again, with the new council, what we've done in the past, I'll use Mr. Fleming as an example. Wade will sometimes just call me directly and say, John, would you have someone look into this? And I'll say, yes, I will. And then more often than not, I don't even advise the other council members because it's not really a policy issue per se, but I let Wade know, or Mark lets Wade know that the issue was taken care of. It's done via email. Wade gets a copy, and so does the complainant or the resident. So that's how I've operated in the past. If you have 9 issues that you want to give to me, I'll deal them out like cards essentially, and you'll get a written response, and then the response will go to you as well as the resident. I mean, we can work it that way too. It's whatever the council wants. I mean, in the past, if it's minor issues, I really don't bother all 7 of you with someone that has a complaint about a sidewalk deflection. But I can. I mean, it's however you want to work it.
Yes, I don't want to bother the council with it either. I just wanted to make a more interactive recognition that the community is being listened to on these little issues that, again, exponentially it could give us a lot of good, positive, forward-thinking involvement in the community. I'm just maybe thinking ahead of myself, but we are running late, so it probably is enough discussion on that issue, don't you think?
And we'll handle it. If we get notified of it, we'll jump on it and make sure that whoever calls gets a copy of it as well as the resident.